Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Think, Engage, Thrive, where we bring you all kinds of entrepreneurs to talk about their story with startups, to give you an understanding of what we all go through and what it really takes to be an entrepreneur and to be successful at it. And we bring some great stories to you. And tonight, we have a great one. I'm always in favor of trying to bring people on that are doing things that I do not understand, but yet still have a purpose. And so it's great because it's educational for me and educational for you and educational for everybody. And so we have a great one, Rob Quigley tonight. He's focused on space. He's focused on, well, you'll hear a story, but he's the co-founder and CEO of New Ascent. He's the driving force between the company's vision to create the company's vision. I'm sorry. And they started out doing ground-based launch systems, which we'll all find out what that is. But now they're doing things with STEM, so they actually have two parts to the company. They haven't abandoned what they were originally doing, but they've sort of expanded it. So we're going to bring Rob on. We're going to listen to what he has to say. It's extremely interesting. It's well above my pay grade, but I love to listen to this type of thing, and I love to understand it. So let's bring Rob in now. Rob, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem, Phil. Happy to be here. Happy to talk to everybody and share what we've been doing and share some of the experiences and the bumps that we've had along the way these past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm sure it's certainly not the same types of things that I've always done, which are really consumer products, where you sort of figure out who your customer is, you figure out your product, and you can start selling. Yours is a bit more, I think, a long tail, long run sell, but yet is extremely interesting. Obviously has applications in multiple places. So I'd like to hear about it. Let's talk about, I think, take us through sort of your background, which eventually probably leads up to what you're doing today. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably started when I was 6 or 7 years old. And I can actually remember the book that I read. It was called Adventures in the Solar System.
Wow.
And, to a lot of kids, it may have been, kind of a dry book, because you basically hopped in this big robot that launched, and he took you to each planet. At each planet, he went through in probably excruciating detail. Oh, and here's the temperature range on Mercury. It can go from 400 degrees to, but I read through that thing. I loved it. I even plagiarized a little bit of it when I had an English assignment to try and write a novel, and I may have called it Adventures in the Solar System or something similar. But that was sort of the first indicator to me, whether or not I realized it at the time, that space was kind of my thing. And I was kind of into that and really into exploration and other things. And I mean, it took a little bit of time as I went through school to finally figure out, oh, okay, hang on. Do I want to be a physicist? Do I want to be an engineer? What route into space do I want to take? And it took a couple of experiences. Like, for one, I was able to scratch the physicist thing off in high school when I went and I did a program over the summer at the Fermilab particle accelerator. So
Wow.
that's out in just outside of Chicago, where I grew up. And they basically, spin up small particles to speeds approaching the speed of light and smash them together. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Let me go see what's going on here. Then I met and got to see sort of the day-to-day of a physicist's, like a working physicist's life or a working scientist's life. And I kind of realized, okay, maybe that's not exactly for me, but I was very interested in the design of everything, how it was built, how it worked, which kind of led me down the path of pursuing my aerospace engineering degree. So that's, yeah. So because I didn't know which direction to go. So yeah, I went ahead, I did that. And coming into school there, I had a couple different experiences. I always kind of knew I wanted to start my own business, but it wasn't something, and I'm going to age myself here, 20 years ago, it wasn't something, or 25 years ago, wasn't something that happened a lot. In the late 90s, you didn't hear about, oh, this guy started up his own space company to build rockets, and now he's successful. And of course, now that is a very well-known story in a couple of ways that number of people are chasing after.
Sure.
But yeah, so I mean, it took me a little while to kind of get my stride. Like I actually said, oh, let me try the small company thing for a little while. And I did that for a year or two outside the space industry and we learned real quick, nope, that's not going to work. I'm kind of bored's probably the right word. I'm kind of bored. This doesn't excite me. It's great that it's a small business, but no, I ended up back in the space industry. And first couple of things that I did there was I was fortunate enough to get a job where I was supporting NASA. And the first project that I worked on for NASA was actually the James Webb Space Telescope.
Wow.
And yeah, that, which I think almost everybody is going to be familiar with at this point, if you've been watching the news, because you've been seeing for the last year all these amazing images of galaxies that we've never seen before, things that we've never seen before starting to pour in. And I mean, it's almost as exciting, or is as exciting as it was when they fixed Hubble and started getting a lot of those images coming in the front door. Like this is a really exciting time for astronomy, and it was the first thing that I worked on, and it was the last thing.
Yeah, it is.
To give you an idea of like the time frame that we work on in the space industry.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing that this whole focus on space over the last 2 to 3 years, between what Elon Musk is doing and trying to get people to Mars and thinking about colonizing, but also what I think is even more fascinating is the release of all these documents to say that yes, the UFOs landed here, or yes, we've made contact. And I think people are enamored with it. But you're 100% correct. There's a YouTube channel that has a lot of the images from space, and they're frankly amazing. Of what we're seeing in the last year or two. I even have a friend who bought a telescope. It must be a very good one. I'm not familiar, but he can take images from it, and the images he gets are incredible for a homeowner or for a normal just a person. I think he's a lawyer and he's just fascinated by it. So
yeah. Well, and I mean that's not to jump too far ahead here, but that's actually a lot of what we're trying to do now with New Ascent. We started with it being focused on the space industry, and I'll get to that bit of the story. But what we realized kind of along the way is that if space is really going to become a thing, not just something that a whole bunch of rocket scientists and billionaires go off and do, but if it's going to become a real thing for everybody, we need to find ways to connect people directly with it.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, hey, I heard this cool news story, or I saw this video of what they did. Like we need to get people actively involved in what's going on. And I mean, I think that has a ton of benefits, overall. And really that ties me back to like kind of the driving force for me behind this is, I don't know if I knew it, but like subconsciously I recognized early on that like people need to be explorers. There need to be explorers. We need to be pushing boundaries. And we do a lot better as a society when we're doing that.
Yeah.
And not to say that there aren't a lot of boundaries here on Earth that are still left to be pushed. But in terms of like physical ones, like, okay, the ocean, deep ocean, but that's kind of about it. We've been everywhere else on the globe where there's dirt.
Yeah.
Right? We've been over every inch of that. And what I kind of, I think, that driving force is, hey, I want to help people explore. Right. I want to help people push their boundaries and get as many people involved and as excited about, the space industry as possible. And, I'm biased, but it doesn't mean I can't lean into it.
Yeah, that's right.
So over the course of the next couple of years of my career, I went ahead, I got involved in an area of our industry that was having to do with manufacturing small satellites. So think anything from the size of like a shoebox, up to something that can fit on your kitchen table. And through that experience, I got to see, I had ended up getting my MBA because I had figured out early on that, there were a ton of ideas out there. Go read any sci-fi novel and you'll see like 10 or 20 of them that may not be actionable right now, but are like there's almost nothing in the space industry that some sci-fi author hasn't already written.
So hey, hang on one second.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the satellites. You're saying that the satellites that you launched were small? I mean, you said You fit on a kitchen table or the box of a shoebox.
Yeah.
It's because I always
Yep.
envision satellites as being these huge, massive structures that are going out.
Yeah. No, I mean, just like the microprocessor industry, it hasn't been following like a squared law, but a lot of the push for the last couple of decades is let's see if we can do things smaller in space to make it more affordable.
Is that how? I read somewhere that Elon Musk has like all these satellites that go, all around or circumvented the globe.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to be buying internet from him in like a year or two,
Oh, is that right?
whether or not you realize it.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And I only say that because of the experience. So I worked for a company that had a competing, a large corporation that had a competing product to Elon Musk's rockets. And for probably 6 or 7 years, I heard nothing but internally, hey, he's never going to do this. He's never going to be able to make this a business at the prices that he says he can do it at. He's never going to be launching once a week.
But he is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, here we are. And he started doing it and he's continuing to do it. And yeah, it's been an impressive thing to watch and really, really positive for our industry too.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, for as much as like you'll get the occasional piece of bad press, like what he's done for the space industry, like and I got to be careful I don't wander too far into fanboy realm here.
Understood.
But no, I mean, he's proved that you can be entrepreneurial in the space industry, which was a huge sort of switch that flipped in my head when I started to see that happening, not only with him, but a bunch of other startups, most of them happening over on the West Coast while we were out here, being old space and stodgy and doing things the same way we had done them for 50 years here on the East Coast. But yeah, he's gotten people excited about it. He gets it in the press, which, I mean, if you subscribe to There's No Bad Press, then the fact that you're hearing about what he's doing, even though, right. It's not like he's doing anything too groundbreaking yet. He's just launching stuff up into space.
Yeah.
Right. All the time. He's not going to the moon. He's not going to Mars. He wants to go there. And, God willing, he'll get there and drag a whole bunch of other people with him. But yeah, no, I mean, he's helping to push things forward in a really positive way. And he's created space to allow, not like that space, but just physical, space within the industry to allow people to take risks and try new things and bring things to the market that weren't there 15 years ago. You wouldn't have even imagined being there 15 years ago.
Wow. That's amazing. So let's stop being fanboy and start.
Yeah. You want me to? Yeah. All right.
Let's go back to you were launching satellites on the size of a kitchen table or a shoebox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now doing that, and the problem that we ran into is they were really attractive from a price standpoint, from what they could do capability wise. Even though they couldn't do as much as something the size of a bus.
Right.
And we had a lot of people interested in buying them, but the story we had to try and sell was, okay, here's a satellite for $10 million. Now to launch it, it's going to cost $50 million. And, even though it might be ready to launch tomorrow, you're going to have to wait like 6 months or a year until you can actually get it up in space and start generating revenue off of it or doing your mission. And that story just didn't take, and we didn't sell a whole lot. So I'd been doing a lot of, I'll call it near entrepreneurial stuff within the company at that point. After getting my business degree, they actually let me do some math with dollar signs instead of with other things. So yeah, and I had been exposed, like I was traveling out to the West Coast, probably about once a month to talk to new startups out there to figure out if there was any sort of meshing we could do with their businesses and ours. Got exposed to it. And really just at that point, I was like, okay, I see a problem here. I got together with a couple of my colleagues and I said, okay, if we had to go, forget rockets for a minute. If we had to go pick something that could be inexpensive to launch these tiny satellites and do it in a way that would solve the cost and the availability problems, what would we do? And where we settled on was space cannons. We said, all right, there are a whole bunch of current technologies and proposed technologies that can get things going, near a speed where instead of using a rocket to get it up into space, you could just fire it from the ground and it would still be going fast enough once it got up in orbit that you could just give it a little kick and send it on its way. And we took a look, at a whole bunch of different things, found one technology. It's called a light gas gun, which many people probably haven't heard of, but just to draw a quick analogy there, it's basically like a potato gun. If you've had the pleasure of firing one of those in your younger days,
I have, yeah.
where you just basically use high pressure, build it up, open the thing up, and your vehicle, your projectile goes on its way. And this particular technology, even a couple of decades ago, was firing things at 5 to 10 times the speed of a high-powered rifle.
Wow.
So pretty dang fast. And we said, okay, this is an existing technology. The systems are proven out. They scale real well. We see a need in the market. Let's go start a startup. Why not? So that's how New Ascent was born. And yeah, so we spent our first couple of years, and we're probably through a number of pivots on like New Ascent business model 2.0 or 2.5. But yeah, no, the initial model was around being a pure launch services provider. So to develop and build these massive gun systems that would launch small satellites up into space for a fraction of the cost that was being paid. I'll qualify this, that was being paid back in 2015 or 2016 when we started the business, and able to do it, 5 or 6 times a day, right? So you wouldn't have to wait weeks on a launch pad to get something up into space. And being mostly engineers. At that point, we said, well, why wouldn't anyone want to buy this? This is great. So yes, I will admit there's been enough time now. I will admit I fell into the trap of many startup founder, startup with a mostly technical background founder, of thinking, okay, well, I've got something that I think is great. Why wouldn't everyone else think that?
Yeah. A focus group of one.
Yeah. Well, no, there were 3 of us.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not the only crazy one.
Yeah.
That's always been a rule for me. Like through the years, I've come up with a couple of hard and fast rules. One of those rules is if I have an idea and I'm the only one who likes it, then we probably should just leave it over here.
Yeah.
But if I can get just one other person to buy into it, oh, we're off to the races.
Yeah, when I mentor entrepreneurs, and whether it's at the University of Maryland or wherever, and everybody's got their idea, and the first thing I tell them is, don't worry about trying to raise money. Go out and try and find a customer for your product and see if you can sell it. And if you can sell it, then you can figure out the business model, but see if you can find a customer.
Yeah, and we, I guess, mistakenly tried to do both at the same time, in addition to trying to develop the system. So we had a great technical PowerPoint deck, a customer deck saying how great it was going to be, and an investor deck saying, yeah, we're going to make billions of dollars off of this.
Yeah.
If only, 0, 1, 2, and 3 can happen. And yeah, what we found out, and it actually took more time. And I don't know if that's just a reflection of, my inexperience in going out and trying to draw out of customers, hey, is this something that you really want? Versus them head nodding and saying, oh yeah, this would be really cool. But in the back of their heads thinking, oh yeah, no, these guys are going to need $100 million. Okay, so I'm not going to, I could take advantage of this and I'm going to pump this guy up as much as I want, but I'm not going to, I'm not really going to commit to it yet.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what ended up happening is we went out and we talked to a lot of customers, and they said, hey, this is really great. Once it's proven, I'd love to buy it. But there were just, as it turns out, all the risk takers in other companies ended up being very selective about how they take risk. And this is another thing, again, first time entrepreneur learning experience. Yes, you are very selective about how you take risks, right?
Yeah.
And you take risks in certain areas, but you take no risk in other areas because either it's been done before, it's working for you, and right now you just see no need to change. And that's kind of what we ran into with this type of system. And there are a couple other companies out there doing something similar right now. One of them's a couple of rounds and maybe $80 million in front of us right now on what they're doing. It'll be really interesting to see how just that pure play launch services thing works out for them and who really signs up
Right.
to be customers. So I think there will be, and but their customers weren't ready back 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Still, part of me still thinks they will be in a few years. So that was kind of the first iteration of the model. So when we didn't get that customer traction, the conversations that we were having with investors at that point, who, those went fairly well to the extent that they got to the end and they said, okay, go show us some customers, go. And one specifically said, yeah, we'll give you, what was it? I'll just ballpark it, like $2 million for a seed round if you go get this company, this specific customer, to nod their head and say, yeah, I'd do this next year. So yeah, I mean, which it's great to have actual tangible goals to go out. It's not so great when you go and you talk to one of the advisors for that company and they say, I'm not letting you near this company with a 10-foot pole because I don't want them distracted from the very simple thing we're trying to get them to do right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that before.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the conversation sort of went like that. So, I mean, we realized, it took about 18 months and a friends and family round, because we actually did raise money. So one of the things is that, I look back and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly and the funny of entrepreneurship. And this was one of the good. Like when I went out to friends and family, when we had nothing but that, PowerPoint deck, and said, hey, I'm looking to do this. And I mean, when you're going out and raising friends and family, unless you're just sort of a complete jerk, like, you're honest about it when you're at that stage. You say, hey, if you give me your money, there's a 95% chance you're not going to see a cent of it back. So if you're going to invest, great, but only invest money you can afford to lose, and just enough money that you'll still talk to me at Christmas if you don't get that, get that penny back. And that was the approach that I took. And I still had, probably about a dozen of my friends and family say, we don't care. We, we've followed you. We've seen what you've done. We're going to take this risk. Now, I'll even say today, they're probably still scratching their heads and saying, okay, why did we do that? Because I'm sure you can't look up the new Ascent stock ticker yet on NASDAQ. Go out and buy a couple shares.
That's always the toughest round, that friends and family round. I've been through it so many times. It's just, it's painful. But you go, you remember when you put money into this? Well, I need you to do it again.
Yeah. Oh, you've gone back to the well. That's brave.
Well, the only, knock wood, but the only problem I ever had was my first startup. First thing I ever did when I was 27. But I didn't go and get money from anyone but myself. I fully funded it. But I did another business back in the late 90s where I built these stores, and I did go out for friends and family, and it was a bit painful. It was touch and go, but then we sold it and everybody got made a bit of money, and then we had them parlay that into Raw Beauty, and then they made a little bit more money, and so it was okay. But my first one was a disaster. But thankfully, I love startups, I love business, I love entrepreneurship. But if there's one thing that I hate, it's raising money. It's the worst thing in the world. You've got to have thick skin. It's time consuming. It's distracting. It takes away from because it's a numbers game. You've got to go out and talk to hundreds of people to get them. And again, everybody's got a different want. Show me some customers, or show me this hurdle, or jump over this hurdle, and it drives me absolutely crazy. And if I never have to do it again, which I hopefully won't ever have to do again, but if I never have to do it again, believe me, it won't be a sad day. But I will say that the best capital that I've ever raised was from strategic partners. Not people that are just putting money in, but somebody who's got a vested interest in the business, whether they're a supplier or whether they're a manufacturer, somebody who's going to learn something from it. That to me was the best capital I ever raised.
Yeah, but well, I mean, they're probably aligned even better than just pure financial investors are.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a big company, and we we took that route too. We explored that route, and again, it was just a too soon type of thing. Like a lot, even though you did say in the lead up here that, oh yeah, business with a long tail, and they're not having to worry about things that you would with a consumer faced startup. Yeah, no, those actually do like bleed over. Like, companies do care about, do you have customers? Is this gonna, are we actually going to be able to sell this? And yeah, well, they can, sometimes be able to take bigger risks and maybe further out risks. There still has to be it still has to be a business, right? It can't
sure.
Yeah,
sure. No question.
Be a fun R&D project. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just longer. It's just longer tail, longer term. It's like when you're developing, the whole healthcare world, or developing new medicines, or developing things like that. You see the investors putting tens of hundreds of millions of dollars in, but you're not going to see anything from it for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. And you've got to be patient for that. So I just look at it the same type of way, because you've got to build what you've got. You've got to have people out there talking to get customers lined up. You've got to have that need. So it's a little bit more complicated than me taking products, putting them on Amazon and selling them type thing. Yours is a lot more complicated. That's why I can't do it, because it's above my pay grade.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, in some extent, like, I don't think the venture capital industry has figured out how to do space yet.
No. Yeah, I would agree with you.
Like they've been putting money into space, but they're, we'll call it, some companies are a decade into it, and still, or firms, VC firms, and they're still saying, okay, where's our return?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got, like the Drapers and the other guys that happen to have personal relationships with Elon Musk or somebody at SpaceX and got in there, and then they can point at that and say, oh, well, yeah, we've 1,000x'd our money since we put it in. But
but that's a one-off. That's a million.
Yes.
That's not happening every day, and that was built on his reputation. Certainly, it's always easier to go out and raise capital once you've had a couple of successes under your belt and people know you, and then it's easier to raise that sort of capital. And I guess Jeff Bezos also has a what's his Blue? Is it?
Yeah, Blue Origin.
Yeah,
Blue
Blue
Origin.
Origin.
Name of his company. Yeah.
And what does he do? Is he launching satellites, or?
He's put it this way, he's still in the phase. He's looking to launch things and do his own constellation of internet satellite, like Elon. So basically, and he's a couple of years behind SpaceX on both of those endeavors. So I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with that one. I just rewatched that Saturday Night Live skit with Owen Wilson. And I don't know if anyone actually watches Saturday Night Live anymore.
I do. I love Saturday Night Live skits. I'm not familiar with the one, but I'll go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, it's like a billionaire, space race, and it's Bezos and Richard Branson shows up, and then Elon Musk like comes over and like the Death Star starts. It's funny.
Yeah. I'll have
At
to
least I
watch
found
that.
it funny.
I'll have to watch it. I do watch Saturday Night Live. I do watch the
Yeah.
skits.
But again, back to no press is bad press in that case. If it gets people thinking about the space industry, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to take a little while to figure out how to properly fund like large infrastructure projects that sort of entail most of what you try and do in space. Yeah, I mean, there is software aspects to it too. And those startups are actually easier to fund, the ones that come in and do analytics and things that big data crunching, that type of stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, no, the ones that are big infrastructure, I don't think the VCs and even PEs kind of figured out how to do that yet.
Yeah. So you building launch systems,
mm-hmm.
and then came the pivot.
Yeah, that was business model 1.0. I'll call it business model 1.5, as we said. We started in that time talking to a couple of government agencies about what we were trying to do. And we got a lot of interest around not only developing this type of launch system, but also using it for hypersonic flight testing. Now, I don't know if the word hypersonic has stuck in your mind at all, but if you go back 3 or 4 years, there were all these news stories out there about, China and Russia have developed these really fast, hypersonic cruise missiles that can get through our defenses and, strike an aircraft carrier and, take out, a power plant, that type of stuff. And the call to arms was the U.S. is behind and we need to catch up. And that hasn't gone away. I mean, that's still out there. But just sort of the press around it has sort of disappeared a little bit. And I mean, by the way, Russia's actually using those in Ukraine right now. If you hadn't realized, like these are, the most advanced cruise missiles coming in at hypersonic speeds, which is why you're seeing the destruction you are from like a single missile.
Is that right?
So we got some interest there, and we said, okay, all right, so maybe we aren't starting this business via VC, via going out and providing commercial launch services. Maybe there's enough interest there within the government to fund the build of one of these systems, off of a contract, and start the business from there, and really get it going. And so we spent about 18 months to 2 years, which for anyone who's looking to get into the government contracting, or they become, go get that big government contract to help fund your startup, you need at least 18 months to 2 years. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's once you establish yourself as a credible company.
Yeah.
And also don't think that just because you came from a large aerospace company and you were able to, you worked on and managed, projects that ran into the tens of millions of dollars that were high technology, high impact type projects, that you have any credibility now that you've started your own business.
Yeah.
You start from square zero when it comes to building that credibility back. So there's a waiting game, and then there's a contracting game that you need to be able to play. And I knew that going in, which is why I said, okay, we're going to give this at least 2 years to try and work itself out. And like I said, so this was a case of, we actually now had a product that a customer wanted, but we were still unfortunately missing the second piece of that, which was, they need to have money to pay for it. And you may think government, the government has a lot of money, but if you're not in that world, you understand, you say the government, but when it comes to actually buying from the government, there's the government, there's the government, there's the government, and then there's the government. And early stage R&D, like we're talking about doing in this particular area, it's down over here. And they have tiny little budgets that, they can only do, very few things at a time. And so that was kind of our blind spot for that second iteration of the business model, was that, we had what people wanted, just the customers didn't have the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
And we weren't talking about a lot of money either. And the nail in that coffin was actually COVID. So, when COVID hit, we were talking about building, you know, our first system in a lab for one particular government customer. We were going through the hoops of, okay, this is the contracting vehicle that we're going to try and use. And then all that sort of, I'll call it the early stage R&D money that the government had, I kind of pulled back to help pay for, and you're going to hear a little bit of bitterness in my voice when I say this, to pay to keep the large aerospace contractors working to keep people employed, right? To not necessarily, I mean, they were performing work, but
yeah,
a lot of them were at home as well.
yeah.
So that kind of killed, well, it didn't kill it. It just put that one in stasis.
Yeah.
I talk about those first two business models as being in stasis because I think there's still a there. And I mean, part of being an entrepreneur is you kind of have to believe. And if you don't have to, and when you stop believing in it, then it's probably time to stop being an entrepreneur or stop at least pursuing that particular business model.
Yeah.
So
then you pivoted again.
We pivoted again. Business model number 2.5. Yeah. And I mean, at that point, it was actually less of a pivot and more just okay, we had noticed that there were these things out there called chipsats, and this is what a chipsat looks like. So we've now taken a satellite down from the size of a shoebox to the size of a, I don't know, I'll call this a generous French fry. And there's not too much you can do with it right now, but you know, we were fortunate to partner with Cornell University, who had been developing them for about a decade. And you know, we had been watching the technology. We had done some tests with it to see, oh, hey, could these survive being shot out of a big space cannon? And figured out, oh yeah, they could, and they still worked and did what they needed to do. So, and sort of concurrent with this is I've got 4 kids, and they started hitting that middle school age range.
Right.
And I started doing things like just kind of poking, like any parent probably does, just, you know, poking about, so how much have you actually learned about what I care about?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you don't know the order of the planets?
Yeah.
Okay. You think you have to be the smartest person in the world to do anything in the space industry? Okay, we have to address this.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of that desire meshed with, okay, we have this inexpensive way to get things up into space, that we actually said, could we do something that a school could actually pay for?
Yeah.
And be willing to do and hit kids at that age range when they're thinking, okay, I'm good at this, but oh, you know, I got a D on a math test. I'll never be able to do anything technical. When they're starting to really box themselves in and give them an experience that could knock them out of that box.
Right.
And I mean, this didn't start as like, oh, you know, this is going to be the business that propels us to being a unicorn. Just sort of started with, okay, we put in blood, sweat, and tears for 4 or 5 years. We've really fleshed out a lot of these technologies, and we're confident it's going to work. Let's just go try and make a product and sell that product and see what happens. I know, very novel. Had I said those words back in 2015, you know, maybe we'd be having a different conversation today.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be doing it from a different spot instead of my office.
Yeah.
But you know, that was just the basic idea. And then we went out and we started doing things the way that startups and all the other industries do them. We went out, we talked to a whole bunch of teachers. We said, hey, where are the gaps? You know, we're aerospace guys. That doesn't, you know, we can't translate to classroom, even though we have kids in school, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to actually educating someone.
Yeah.
So we started with the customer. We said, we think we can do something like this. Does this help fill some of your problems? And we started seeing heads nodding, and we said, okay, then let's go build. And again, we actually leveraged COVID. We said, okay, it looks like all the classrooms now are almost 1-to-1 on devices. What can we do that's in classroom, that is affordable for the schools, that really makes kids feel like they're part of a bona fide space mission? So we built up our first product called Mission Subspace, and we did a pilot program, brought it to the schools. We're in the schools. kids loved it. Kids had a great time. Teachers loved it. And I mean, started even, with the 10 or 12 schools that we did it with, starting to see an impact. And that kind of had a real, impact on me. In that I'm like, wait a second, this is sort of simple, like in the scope of things that I've been trained to do. It's really interesting. And like the kids are getting it. Like I had teachers coming up to me, weeks later and saying, hey, there was this kid who never like really talked much in class. I didn't think, they were that, driven, they never, offered a whole lot. And whether or not you realized it, that was the kid that, because we do a Q&A, which is a huge part of this too. Like if anybody doesn't have an appreciation for making yourselves available in just a very semi-informal, but sort of ask anything you want about what I go do on a daily basis as a professional. Like if you've never had that type of experience, I recommend it, because it is. And the questions you get, some of them are going to be out of left field, but some of them are really good. And what we found out is somebody who had come up and asked like 5 questions through the court, like the most questions out of everybody in the classroom, was this person who had never really spoken up in class before. And so, I mean, and that sort of feeling, maybe, when you're 20 something, it's not as, doesn't have as much of an impact on you. But, when you're 40, when you have kids, when you start to see, okay, we're really starting to dig in here. We really can help people connect with what we're doing in the industry. And that's just spawned this whole flood of ideas of, okay, can we create, at least now at the institutional level, but can we even go down to the consumer level? Yeah, I mean, I'll probably be calling you in a couple of years to find out how we sell, mission subspace, kitchen sink to on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Well, if you could turn it into a gamification type thing, if you could turn it into something like that, then yeah, I mean, look at what Microsoft did with Flight Simulator, right?
yeah.
Which was just taking what was what pilots used to and brought it down to human level, and people who never fly and never had an interest love it. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's I'll look it right here. So would you pay if I took one of these chipsats and launched it up into space and it started descending down? Would you pay in real time to be able to joystick that on its way down, like fly it on its way down to some point on the ground in some sort of competition, right? Where maybe you win a prize or
I think that
no.
I do think that there are a lot of people who would do that. I'm serious. I mean, I think that when you start, you have to look at. I'm not a gamer, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't interest me. And but the gamer market, which is guys that are 40 and under, 40 to 12 or whatever, it's a huge market, and there are people out there that do it. I'm not that type of person. I never got into video games, but I would think that that would be your market, and I would think that there'd be a huge demand for that. So
Yeah, I'd hope so. But
yeah.
another lesson for the entrepreneurs. Those are the questions you have to be willing to ask, right? And hear a no.
Well, I'm not your target, so I
No,
wouldn't.
no, no, no. I understand. Yeah, I was just making the point.
No, I
Yeah,
understand, but
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying is, if you directly hit your target,
yeah.
I bet you if my son left for college, but I bet you if I asked him, he would say yes. I bet you if I asked my daughter, she would say yes. But I personally, it just I can't sit in front of a screen and play games. It just it's never excited me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll find something. Don't worry. We've got other ideas.
No, I'm not saying that
But,
that's not a good one. I mean, certainly
oh
there's
no, I mean I'll find something for you.
oh there we had this guy Will Gee on. I don't know if you know him, but he came out of the game world. He came out of game development, and he
Mhm.
does a lot of work with AR, VR, mostly AR stuff. But he would be great to talk to, for you to talk to, about taking that to in a different way and developing a product around it.
Oh yeah, I've gotten at least one person to buy into some type of like augmented reality around being out at the launch site, getting to actually like see these things get launched off.
Yeah, I
And
think that'd be
yeah,
exciting, and I think
yeah,
it'd be exciting to be able to see what was happening, up in space.
yeah,
So so now so now your product is really geared towards the STEM world
yes.
in schools, which seems to be working.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the point now where we're selling a paid version of it. We've sold a couple, and now we're just facing that. It's just a very the common challenge, but not not to make it seem small or unimportant. Of okay, how do we reach our customers? How do we get our name out there? How do we let them know that this is something that they can go do? So it's marketing, right?
Yeah.
And how do we? It's a different mode that we've had to shift into. And I mean, I recognize that, and we went out and we hired somebody who has sold into the education market for a couple of decades. Uh,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, our first person that we hired passed. So there's another. We haven't talked about bad days yet, but that was one of our bad days. One of the probably the top five, not very close to the top bad days that we had, and we had it earlier this year. But we were able to go out and find somebody else who was willing to take a risk, saw the vision, and with that same background. Yeah, because I'm not going to pretend I know. Like I did business development in the space industry, which we had like 5 customers, and I'd go out and I'd talk to them and have long dinners and really get into their psyche and figure out, and then talk techie and figure out
Yeah. Yeah.
how to sell to them. Yeah, I can't do that with 100,000 customers.
No,
So
no. It's a
yeah,
different animal.
yeah, no, it's completely different animal, very, very different industry, customer type, different layout. Actually, not too different from your run-of-the-mill government customer. There's so like,
Yeah.
I mean, I say 100,000, and I know compared to some other markets where it's millions and billions of customers, right? That's a different scale altogether. But
Yeah.
this for this type of product, it's kind of a new thing. So I'm sure we're making mistakes. We're going to make a lot of mistakes, but we got to go
Everybody
make
does.
those. We're going to learn, and we're going to if I have my druthers, we're going to have this in every classroom by the end of the decade. So,
Yeah.
or every school at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes. So do you have any parting stories? Anything great? Any if you wanted to tell an entrepreneur something about your history with entrepreneurship, what would you tell them?
Yeah. Oh, geez. That's a tall order.
Well, I mean, you think about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
No. Yeah. I mean, so a couple of things. One is like part of what I've really enjoyed about this is you never know where it's going to take you, and you
yeah,
never know. You could meet someone, say when you walk into the University of Maryland, looking to talk to their entrepreneurial group, and they all look at you cross-eyed and say, "Hey, sit down next to this guy because he looks, not he looks like he could use someone to talk to." And then you end up on his TV show like 4 years later. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's taken me to a lot of places that I never would have gone, both, you know, just physically, but also just with my career. Like it's challenged me in a way that I wasn't challenged before. And if that like be ready for it. Because here's sort of the bad part is get used to now. And they're all gonna sting. They're
oh
gonna
yeah,
sting a little less, right? The first couple of big ones really really kind of sting, and that's where you wake up that next morning and you figure out whether or not you actually are serious about what you're trying to do. But also cherish the days that you actually hear yes,
yeah,
because you're going to have like there's just a bunch of different types of startup days. Most of them are just regular days where you're just kind of grinding away, doing your thing, pursuing your strategy. But there are yes days, which are great. There are no days, which aren't so great. There are roller coaster days, which I've had some real doozies, and we probably don't have time to get into on this interview. And then there are the what the hell just happened today?
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. One of those where I walked into, well, no, actually, that's too long to get into in the time we have. But it also, yeah, you will find if you're trying to raise money that you're going to get put in front of rabid mobs at least once or twice in that journey, and that's sort of the story that I'm glossing over right now. But,
Yeah. No, there's no
uh,
question. I mean,
It,
like I've said before, raising money is a difficult thing, and you have to
yeah,
have
no,
thick skin.
yeah, no, you absolutely do. And yeah, and I mean, it's actually like it does help in other, avenues of your life beyond just your career, like learning to hear that, especially if you're like me and, played it sort of safe, for the first couple of years of your career and, you didn't fail a lot. You didn't hear no. I mean, I heard no more in the first 6 months of new Ascent than I did in like the prior 15 years. And I failed more in those first 6 months too than I did in the prior years.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, but I mean, if you believe in what you're doing, if you can stick with it, it does. Even if it's not paying, financial dividends yet, which we're still kind of in that bucket. It does pay dividends in a lot of other ways.
yeah,
And maybe it doesn't work out, and you go try something else.
yeah.
Right? That's the worst thing that can
That's the
happen.
worst case scenario.
Yeah,
That's
or maybe
that's
you
always,
have to sit through, 5 or 10 minutes of just uncomfortable, dinner table time
yeah.
with your parents after you you spent their money and they haven't seen it back yet.
Well, I find as long as you keep everybody informed of what's happening, everybody
Yeah.
is placated. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing. All right, Rob, I appreciate you being on. I think it was a great discussion. For me, it's always great, like I said, to have people on that running businesses or starting businesses or doing things that I have no concept of, because it's educational for me as well. Because I get stuck in my little world of consumer products and consumerism, and that's what I've known for 30 years of my life. I know how to sell. I understand how to put things in front of consumers. So whenever I see things like this, it fascinates me. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this was a lot of fun. I wasn't sure, but yeah. No, yeah, no, appreciate the time, appreciate the platform here. Yeah, and happy to, if any of the advice or any of the stories that I've relayed today help someone out, happy to have helped you.
Yeah. Hey, great. Thanks a lot. I got a couple of things to end with. So, again, good having you. And I look forward to talking to you in the future. And I think I'm going to hook you up with a guy named Will Gee to see if there's
Okay.
anything. It's always good to talk to people. So,
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Phil.
all right. Thanks. Yeah. You heard from Rob. I think it's fascinating. Space is fascinating. His business is fascinating, but the ability to pivot. And we've talked about the pivot millions and millions of times, right? We've had a lot of guys on here. Every single entrepreneur that we've had on, no matter how successful they are, they've always said at some point they had to pivot. And here he's pivoted into something that's now working and can generate revenue and is scalable, and still not losing sight of what their ultimate startup goal was, which was to do launch systems, so they can do them both, and that they're not mutually exclusive. So I think it's interesting. Um, so um, I built this. Let me see if I can pop this up here, because I messed up the words. But if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to directly to the page where you can download a startup planning guide that I've told you about before. Just to make it easier, you can scan it right off your TV. You can scan it right off your screen, wherever you're watching this. I messed up the words. I meant to put a little white background on this, and it didn't come through. But all it says is scan your code for the complimentary startup business planning guide. So just to make it easy for you to go in and get that. So scan it. Go to the site, download it. The reason I did it was because I find business planning tools to be cumbersome and just not very focused on what startup people or entrepreneurs need to get going. So take advantage of it. Again, it's complimentary. There's no you don't have to do anything for it. Just take it. It's a PDF. You can fill it out on your computer or your laptop or your iPad, whatever you want to do, even on your phone. So, yeah, so next week we've got actually another educational tech product that's focused on it with an AI twist. So I think you're going to enjoy that one. So, yeah, look forward to next week. It's going to be great. We got a couple of great ones coming up. So I look forward to seeing you next week and thereafter. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Amy Joy, and I'm the host of Get Your Together Live with Amy Joy. And you can catch me every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific on the amazing Trajectory channel right here on E360 TV.